Hey folks, welcome to this first video, What is so special about permaculture design? I'm going to share with you a couple of my own anecdotes and experiences in this journey of discovering what permaculture really is, and I hope you get a chance to share with us some of your stories as well, because this journey is unique to all of us, but I think it touches a portion of what's missing in our world today. For me, permaculture has been a realization of how important our ancient knowledge is when it's combined with today's observation, today's problems, today's technology, and today's needs. If you know, look at our own upbringings, we all have different experiences. We all have different things that have gone on in our lives, and there are moments that you really remember as being crucial to your upbringing and how it affects you in your growth. And I remember when I was young, I was raised on 72 acres of under regrowth fields, and then a lot of it was mainly forest. And we learned as kids how to make fires. We learned how to grow vegetables. I had my own little garden plot, and grew tons of cucumbers and rhubarb and many other things. And we had this experience of being really in touch with the land. We would, you wouldn't just throw away any electronic thing. We would take every motor off of it and every switch off of it so that we could take those motors and switches and plug them into our Lego. And make robotic cars before Lego had its own robotic division, right? So we came from this real kind of problem-solving mentality as I was a child, as I grew up. And I remember once I was lost in the woods. I wasn't that lost. I was getting disoriented. There's that moment when you're walking, and you're not sure. You turn, you turn, and you turn, and the trees start to look the same, and you don't remember exactly where you've come from. So we're getting we weren't fully lost. We're getting just a bit disoriented. And there's this moment of panic that comes over you. And then there's also a moment of, okay, I have my pocket knife. Okay, I have my flint and steel. Then I'm okay, because I know where I generally am. I know what general compass direction I need to get home. And if I have to set up shelter for the night, I know how. With a flint and steel, I can start a fire. With a pocket knife, I can build shelter. Everything from gathering the roots of the trees to make the rope to bind the poles and make a brush for it that will keep me warm in the winter. And this is part of, for me, discovering permaculture before I even knew what permaculture was, because all of this is understanding your environment through observation and preparing how you approach the situation based on those observations. And so, as we are humans on Earth today, we need to have these basic skill sets of being able to find drinking water and or purify it if you have to build shelter in a time of emergency if you have to find out what foods are edible or not. And it doesn't mean to have memorized all the edible wild foods in the forest, but definitely know those poisonous ones. You want to be able to avoid those ones that can make you incredibly sick or kill you. And knowing how to deal with those situations means that you're not panicked and you're not terrified of exploring a little further in the woods than you would have normally. Um, it gives you this not security, but a confidence, right? And it's about being trained. It's about being equipped, right? Go imagine arriving at a new job, and it's an IT job, and you know nothing about computers, and it's all computer based, right? Of course you're going to be panicked. Of course you're going to be stressed. Of course this is going to make you, terrified of what's going on, and you're just totally lost the whole time. But if you understand what you need to do and how to work a computer and how to use these programs, well, then it's fine. You learn as you go. Right? So the same thing with our lives. We've been taught so much in our schools, so much language, math, science, yet who really knows, what foods are out there wild and edible? Who really knows what work it's taken to develop the foods that we have today? That corn came from teosinte, these 6 little kernels, and now became what we have, sweet corn, because of human intervention and selection through thousands of years. Right? These are parts of our humanity that we are at risk of losing. These are parts of your heritage, parts of your cultural base that we have been so disconnected from. And I had this opportunity, this luxury of being raised on the land where coming to the city, I realized that so many people have never grown a tomato or eaten a vegetable off of a plant. I've had, you know, kids that in some of our workshops who didn't know, how potatoes grew, that they came out of the dirt, or where, vegetables and fruits came from. So there's this huge void that we're facing today. There's this huge gap between where we are and where we need to be, and I think a large portion of that journey can be filled with some of these basic needs. Now, obviously, we're not going to solve the world's problems by knowing how to use a flint and steel and build shelter with a pocket knife. But what we do get out of it is a confidence to move forward in times of change, a confidence to move forward in times of stress. If you are not, if you know how to go get food, then you're not as terrified by a loss of job, because one less thing is an urgent matter of fact, right? If you know about dumpster diving, if you know about wild foraging, if you know where the location of the nut trees are in your city, and the apple trees, and you have it in a calendar of when they're going to be fruiting and how to go gather those, now we've got to work with shelter and electricity and heating, but food security is taken care of. And so for permaculture, in my mind, it's been much more of a discovery of how do we as people on Earth today discover the needs that have been lacking in the last 100 years of developed world evolution in our society, that have led to this point of utter dependency, where we are crucially dependent on our jobs for our healthcare or for our food or for our shelter. And we as human species on Earth today, we don't actually have the freedom of any other species on Earth to go and gather food, because that knowledge is not passed down. We don't have the freedom of any other species to go and build shelter, like the blue jay that comes and steals rope off your picnic table to make a nest, or the termites that take the mud from beneath their feet and build a home. We don't have those skills. We don't have that knowledge, and I think this creates a void in us, a emptiness, a despair, or a disconnectedness that, if left unfettered, unchanged, unfixed, we end up with that void that we are endlessly trying to fill. And I think it's a lack of rootedness. And whether you're rooted in a specific land or not, rooted in your own culture, rooted in the ancestral work that has come from hundreds of generations of humans on Earth today, and is literally on your plate in front of you, is all around you, is so crucial, right? That disconnection from it, because we have no time in our lives. We're very linear. We're looking at our, you're going to work as much as you can, get educated, get a good job, work as much as you can so that you can have money to retire and have fun then. Yet our entire lives are these empty, journeys of trying to fulfill that missing void. And many of us have discovered that void is being with family and friends, being with nature and enjoying it and learning and cooking and making good food and growing good food. These are things that fulfill people's well-being and happiness and their needs. And so when we look at permaculture as where it's placing itself in the world today, it's about this interconnectedness, interdependence between the environmental movement, the social movements, the justice movements, racial justice, and poverty and despair. All of these things are aspects and facets of our society that all need to be addressed. And when we look at permaculture, it's not a solution. It's not a technique. It's a process by which we can understand our environment and the earth upon which we live and depend, to develop and test solutions to the problems that we face. Therefore, it's not a band-aid that's going to just fix it for today or for this generation. It's a way of life. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of seeing the world and seeing the challenges that we face, and seeing the good and the learnings that we can get from even the most devastating instances. So many times in our life we evaluate things as good and bad, right? Even grow your vegetables, grow your tomatoes, and when those slugs devour a part of your garden, it's a fail. Well, it's not a fail because it's an opportunity for learning. And nature doesn't work in one season at a time. It works over thousands of years. And so if we're not looking at things over a larger time frame, taking a step back from those panic moments, from those failures and those successes, to evaluate how did we achieve success and how did we achieve failure, and then where and what can we tweak and change along the way. You know, if we're not thinking about all of these different things, then what are we doing? We're just running blind with a sense of urgency and need to pay the next bills and get the next grocery run and stave off the foreclosure. You know, whatever it is that we're fighting against, that fight becomes you. And we aren't able to be mindful about how and what it means to be human today on Earth, and how and what we can do to change the lives of others, to change our life, to lead by example and live a healthier, happier, more abundant life by observing around you what's there and working with that to make your dreams come true, make your project thrive, make your garden grow. So much of this is way bigger than an agricultural technique, which is what most people consider or understand permaculture to be. One of the crucial elements of permaculture, to sum it up, is this holistic systems thinking rather than a linear thinking. And too many people, even in ecological agriculture or ecological design, will place all these, sustainably designed elements together and not connect them. You can have, companion planting in your garden, and you can have mulch on your garden, and you can have swales dug. But if you're buying the mulch and putting it in your garden, if your companion plants are, you're not looking at how they're actually what companions are doing what in your garden, attracting what beneficials, how they're interconnected, what species they're supporting. If your swales are all separate swales, or your passive flood irrigation pathways are all separate systems and not flooding from one to the next to the next to the next and then back out to the sewer or the river or whatever other river system is connected, we're not really achieving this holistic design, which is what nature is all about, is a systems-based design. So when we break out of that linear model and really start connecting things together, we start to see these iterations of successes and abundances and feedbacks that we never expected, right? Benefits that we never expected. So it's so crucial that we take a step back from what we know as a, producer or consumer society. You are either someone who consumes, so what does that mean? You have to go to work, make money so that you can consume life. Or you're a producer, you make things, you make food, and so that your work is producing things that then you have to sell back to people to make your living, right? But so many of us don't realize that each and every one of us every day are both consumers and producers at the core of our biological function. You eat and you produce. We consume and we produce. And so if we don't acknowledge that every element in our life is a system, every element is connected to the earth through your production and waste outputs, right? We will never really attain a holistically abundant society that we're really hoping for. So it begins with shedding a light on this linearity that we've accepted as the way that we live, right? Even our governance systems today, our democracy, rooted in a 4-year cycle that we go and maybe progress a little over 4 years and then we diminish. We don't look at, there isn't this holistic long-term investment. Our leaders want to impact, and this is very generalized, but impact the short period so that they, have that ability to renew. But very often we're not looking at these lasting big changes in our society that go beyond the political time frame that they're in. So I think it's crucial. I think it's absolutely something that we cannot actually live without. It's not whether we use the term permaculture or not. It's irrelevant. It is how species on Earth function. It is the language of the evolution of the Earth. It is the patterns that make things real. It is observing and understanding and reacting to that. And when it doesn't work well with your reaction, we observe and understand and react differently the next time. It's very simple. But it provides us a framework to grow and learn and design strategic solutions to the core problems that we are facing every day in our lives. So many times when we are teaching introduction to permaculture or introduction to ecological gardening or whatever it is, we get this question over and over, time and time again, is how is permaculture not gardening? What makes it different than just a ecological gardening or biointensive gardening or biodynamic gardening? As farming is one of them that's very much paralleled. People parallel it. And that is interesting because it's, again, going back to this holistic versus linear, the understanding of permaculture as a technique, it completely misses the point that it is a philosophy of observation-based design, right? It's a philosophy that we use to design things. And so if you want to design gardens, yeah, great. It actually works really well. And has been most demonstrated in agriculture, in market gardening, and in food forestry, and in small livestock management, and even large livestock management. But passive solar design is observing that the sun has a certain arc in the sky, and the coldest day of the year is a certain height in the sky, and therefore if you design your windows a certain way, you can capture that heat and use it. That's observation-based design. There's no food involved. There's no gardening involved. Permaculture is not gardening or food-based at all. It is about creating systems that are observing and adhering to the resources that we see around us, the problems that we see around us. It is a observation-based design science, right? That's it. So whether you apply it to your farm, your potted plants, the way you design your new building that you're building, and the way we design our communities, the way we design our water catchment and infrastructure. The cities that we live in today are facing more and more land subsidence because the weight of the city is collapsing these air chambers beneath the ground that were once filled with water in the aquifers, as we've now pumped that water out to feed the inhabitants of that city. But we've paved over every open surface of the ground that would normally absorb water and recharge those aquifers, which would give the support needed to prevent the city from collapsing that infrastructure. So the failure of our cities to catch, store, and soak the water back into the ground, and catch and store and use the water, is creating a situation where we are draining the long-term capacity of our soils to hold water, and we are basically eroding our future. Those aquifers take thousands of years to recharge, and actually we can't refill them once they've been collapsed. That's a geological process, right? And the city won't survive that. So when we look at the basic fails in our world today, our cities capture something like 1% of the water that lands on them soaks into the city, and yet we have flooding issues, we have drought issues, and we have massive water consumption issues, all which can be designed by catching, storing, and utilizing the rainwater that lands on your city. And this works in desert as well as tropical monsoon areas, right? So many aspects of our lives that are way beyond agriculture need this holistic design science. When we look at our office buildings, who here works in an office, right? Yeah, indoors most of your life. There's a study that was done that shows that we live indoors and we work indoors and we travel to and from, usually in a vehicle or a metro. And so it means that 90% of our lives are trapped inside buildings. So we can't say that to be healthy beings, we need to go outside more, because our lives are designed to be inside. What we need to do is learn how to design patterns of nature in our buildings. And so there's a whole domain called biophilic design that is around mimicking the patterns of nature in our homes, in our offices, in our bedrooms, which brings down stress. It increases creativity, increases problem solving, reduces need for drug consumption in old age homes, reduces the severity of illnesses in hospitals, reduces the stress and burnout in office buildings. It's incredible what bringing back patterns of nature can do to our human psyche. And it's a no-brainer. We've evolved for thousands of years in nature, and then we live now in these little gray boxes. So obviously bringing back patterns and smells and stimulation of nature into our lives will have a very beneficial change. So many of us have varying degrees of, interest in ecological design or gardening or whatever it is. But many of you, if not all of you, have some problem that you're facing in your life. Problem with your job, problem with your family, problem with your building, problem with your garden, problem with flooding, whatever it is. There's dozens of them, right? If your homework was list your problems, you're done pretty easily. So who here has easy solutions to fix all those problems? No, not most of us. But what's your process for solving those solutions? We ask people for solutions. We look for solutions online. Those solutions that we find from other people are not based in the exact same situation that we have, and therefore sometimes they're appropriate and sometimes they're not. And this is actually one of the main issues that we face with online gardening tips and online agriculture tips, is it's things like the hugelkultur, which is an interesting technique for using waste wood to build a garden bed, but should not be used ever on clay, should not be integrated with a swale for risk of landslide. It's got all these different problems, but people just see it on Pinterest and then they go home and make one and copy and paste. And so this is how we often solve problems in our lives today. So what's so crucial about understanding a better way is that when you take something like the fundamentals of permaculture, when we just get into understanding the basics of this philosophical process of observing, analyzing what we've observed, and then working with that to develop solutions and apply those and test and iterate them to make sure they're actually working and interconnect them with all the other solutions and problems that we face, we actually are empowered because you now have your toolkit to tackle problems, right? It's a nature-based problem-solving system, and so it empowers you to do whatever you need to do. I've seen people working in industrial factory consulting, and they have looked at the conveyor belt that goes through the production line, and they've mimicked the way the conveyor belt moves so that it mimics the meandering river, right? And what it means is that there's actually less repetitive movement for workers dramatically, so now there's like a decrease in the injuries from repetitive movement. The person who's working the conveyor belt has access to the belt for much longer as it goes and meanders around them, so they don't have to be sidestepping all the time and moving. It has increased the productivity of the factory dramatically. So we're not even, we're looking at efficiency, we're looking at systems, we're looking at ways to learn from what's around us. And I think that's why, in my mind, permaculture is so much more than any farming or agriculture or food-based technique. It is something that we all need to delve into just a little bit to see how you can bring that to your life, bring that to your needs and help tool yourself to be able to solve problems that you face in your life. I think the final way that permaculture has changed my life is that it gives me a process that I can use to learn even better ways of listening. Our observation exercises, when we talk about observation, we often get distracted by ideas. And that's the same thing that happens when you're talking to people. And so through this analysis of permaculture, I've become a better listener. Through this analysis of applying permaculture to our everyday lives, I think I've become a better partner, with my fiance, with my friends, with my family. It reflects to you all of the different things that are going on because you become incredibly observant. You see all kinds of things around you, right? And so by learning this basic observation, by learning this ability to observe and then analyze and then design solutions, we become better players in the game of life. We become better humans in this ecosystem, in this social space, better friends, better family members, and we have an easy tool set that gets us there. So if you feel lost in some way, if you feel stressed or unsure about what you need to move forward, my dad says, when you're worrying, he says, well, why are you worrying? If you're worrying about something, can you do something about it? If yes, then yeah, do something about it. Don't worry. And if no, well, you can't change it, so don't worry. You can't change it anyway. But the question is usually, well, can you do something about it? Well, that stops there if you don't currently know a solution. But if you then say, well, yeah, I can do something about it, I can observe and I can see what is going on and how can I implement my efforts or energy or strategy, or maybe I need to seek more information and bring that in. And then all of a sudden, the things that are stressing us, the things that are worrying us, that are burning us out, we have a strategic process to be able to unravel those and reweave them back into a system that works for us so that we become stronger, healthier, better people and family members and friends throughout this journey that we're all facing together.